Hi, I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Dear Moon to Moon, it's Britton, your host. Welcome back. It is my deep honor, my deep, deep, deep honor to share the voice and the wisdom of Amanda Yates Garcia, Oracle of Los Angeles, in this episode of Moon to Moon. I've been holding this one close to me for a while, listening for the right timing, and I'm releasing it today to be a torch, to be a beacon of inspiration, to be a source of nourishment to all who listen. Amanda Yates Garcia is someone that I've admired a very long time. She's someone that I watch and admire for the way she moves through this world. It's been a long time dream of mine to host her in Moon to Moon, to share space with her, let her wisdom come through for Moon to Moon listeners. And for a long time, it wasn't time. There were also voices in me that were scared and nervous to ask. But a couple of months ago, in Sagittarius season, Amanda shared a message on her Substack, where I'm a member. And it was so powerful. It really moved through me in this electric way. I immediately reached out and asked her if she would come and share something from the force of what came through for her in writing that particular message, which we share in our conversation. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing yourself and your heart and your wisdom with the Moon to Moon community and with me. Thank you for your integrity. Thank you for your rage. Thank you for your truth. Thank you for your humanity. It's an honor to share space with you and to be on this timeline with you. For those of you who may not know Amanda Yates Garcia, if there's any of you who don't, welcome. Welcome to the frequency. Let me share her bio. Amanda Yates Garcia is a writer, witch, and the Oracle of Los Angeles. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, the LA Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, the London Times, CNN, Bravo, as well as a viral appearance on Fox. She has led rituals, classes, and workshops on magic and witchcraft at UCLA, UC Irvine, MOCA, the Hammer Museum, LACMA, the Getty, and many other venues. Amanda hosts monthly moon rituals online and the popular Between the Worlds podcast, which looks at the Western mystery traditions through a mythopoetic lens. Her book, Initiated, Memoir of a Witch, received a starred review from Kirkuson Publishers Weekly and has been translated into 6 languages. To find out more about her work, become a member of her mystery cult on Substack. All links will be provided in the show notes, inviting you to join in community with Amanda Yates Garcia if you feel called to be supported by her wisdom and by those in the communities that she constellates. And now, with hand on heart, I offer you my conversation with Amanda Yates Garcia. Enjoy. Welcome to Moon, Amanda Yates Garcia, Oracle of LA. So glad to have you here.
It's my great honor and delight to be here, Britton. Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like you've been by my side through nearly all the years of my mystical pathway. That's what I like to call it. Started late 2017. I just checked my email, and my first booking with you was January 2019. That year, you held space for me twice as I was a budding astrologer speaker in the world. And I remember those readings well. Thank you.
Well, I don't remember what we said in the readings, but I remember you and I remember thinking, that girl's going places. I remember thinking that you, after doing this work for so long and seeing people come into the biz and out of the biz and everything, the biz being like the witch biz, astrology biz, the tarot biz, you can really tell which people are going to really flourish in this ecosystem. Sometimes this isn't the right ecosystem for a person, even though they might have a longing to do it. It might just not be the right fit. But you definitely had all the things that I feel like are required. You had the passion, you had a real interest and curiosity. And I also think it's always really beautiful and often works out really well when people have another interest that they apply, lens that they use to apply to the medium of witch work, astrology or tarot or general witch work. And you had that beautiful art history background, which I feel like just brings alive and gives this whole new layer of meaning and helps people find their way in and helps find an audience that you like, because usually if you use that lens, so if you're approaching through an art history lens, and you're going to attract all these people who are really interested in the arts and interested in history and intellectual culture, and like all of you out there listening, I'm sure are thinking, yeah, that's me. I am an intellectual art witch. So I could see how that was going to really blossom, and it really has. Congratulations. Like, you are doing such amazing work in the world. Such an honor to see that grow.
Thank you. My goodness. I remember that there was this one day inspired by something that you had said somewhere, maybe on your podcast. I did an Instagram story series relating Nine of Swords to various images from art history. And then you forwarded it to your audience and had everyone comment. And my audience
literally doubled that day. Thank you. I mean, at that time it was like 350 to 700. Like, woo!
I remember that now. I'd forgotten about that. And that was a great post. That was a great post. That was worth an audience double. Yeah.
Well, it's so true what you're saying. Yesterday in my the initiation for my new class on unshaming your chart, uh I just had this idea all of a sudden to apply Michel Foucault and the panopticon to surveillance and the optics of shame. And it was like, oh my gosh, just back pocket. And it really just speaks to how whatever we were doing that maybe we left, it's not like it wasn't worth it or like it was like a waste of
Exactly.
time. Like, no, I was just accruing things through my passions then. And yeah, I'm not an art history professor anymore, but that all of that stayed with me. We're onto the next pathway. So yeah, it's a
Yeah. My mom, I've told this story before, so maybe some of your listeners will have heard it, but I after I finally figured out my path with the work that I'm doing now, and I was doing it for a long time and starting to achieve some degree of, stability, success with it. I was in my mid 30s by that point, and my 20s were really racked with strife financially. I was like doing I was clawing my way out of, the depths of despair financially. And I said to my mother, gosh, I wish I would have become the Oracle of Los Angeles, in my
wow.
20s.
Oh, I
And,
see. Mhm.
and I wish I would have become the Oracle of Los Angeles in my 20s instead of like suffering and struggling like I did. And she was like, well, you couldn't have done it then. You needed to go through all of that to be able to do the work that you're doing now. That's why you're able to do the work that you're doing now. Because
Mhm.
the work of the witch is holding a lot of complexity and holding a lot of ambiguity and being able to walk in the shadow and being able to uh, have the confidence to move towards what inspires you, towards that torch. There's a lot that goes into it that requires maturity that you can't do when you're younger. I'm not saying there's no young witch out there who's like rocking it, but I'm saying like we each have our own process, and whatever we went through is what was necessary to get to the next place. And also, yes, we have these lives. Like you had the whole life of art history that now you've kind of composted and has created this very rich compost that can
Mhm.
grow this whole garden of thought and creativity and inspiration around the work that you're doing now. So bravo to you.
And you, thank you. Yeah, I'm really into maturity.
When? Yes.
Actually had Saturn on my son for the third pass yesterday. So, I keep finding myself saying this Saturn year for me, just like it's about maturity, like unshaming being young and also maturity is amazing. What it allows in terms of, like you're saying, the contradictions and the uncertainty. It's so scary to hold all that when we're younger.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it amazing that maturity is so different than you think it's going to be?
Yeah.
Like, it's actually a lot more fun and porous and open. I mean, one of the things that I've discovered, ironically, around maturity and Saturn is that maturity gives you a lot of freedom that you don't have when you don't have it, that maturity. Like, for example, let's take relationships or like love, which is something that's often on people's minds. Like when I'll speak for myself. I don't want to be like, when you all were so immature, but more like for me, in my times where I hadn't yet come into full maturity, I was really a slave to love in a way. Like I couldn't discern what worked for me, what didn't work for me. I would get very attached to people, that maybe didn't merit that kind of attachment. And I would also base my opinion of myself on the validation of that person, whether or not they did or didn't, want to be with me or whatever. And I find that as I have grown older and more mature, because that's not necessarily just because we get older doesn't necessarily mean we get more mature. I think most of us can witness that in the world around us. But
yes.
But I find liberation in that maturity because it's like I have come into this realization of maturity as co-creation, or relation as co-creation, which is something that we have to deprogram ourselves to really understand, because we are so individualistic, and in our culture we're raised to think like that. And so, like, if someone can't give me what I know that I need, then I can walk away from it in a way that I couldn't before. It'd take me months and would hurt. But now I can just be like, this is the reality. So I am going to just let it be this way. I'm not going to try and force something to happen that doesn't want to happen. And is the same is true for myself. Like, I really love about maturity that I can sense into how I'm feeling about a thing, and I don't tell myself like, oh, you should be feeling differently than you are.
Yeah. And like what that does to beauty kind of blows my mind too, that whatever it is that is like the furnace inside that feels anger and grief and all the things. Like what it feels like to me is like my beauty comes through the more I'm connected to that furnace. And it's a thing that radiates out, not like a set of features on my face or something. And and so this is the most shocking thing to me about aging. It's just like my relationship to the concept beauty is been turned upside down as I've been connected to my inner world. Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's what I mean by that freedom that comes, because we're socially conditioned in youth to believe that a certain set of features is what is beautiful. And, our entire culture is determined to make us see or value a certain set of categories. And I mean, obviously, it really benefits a certain select group of people to the detriment of basically everyone. When we're all spending all our money and time and effort to try and fit into a specific category. And then, especially for people who are socialized as feminine, that it's very like there's this constant threat, this sort of sword hanging over your head, like, oh, you're going to age and then you're going to be worth nothing. And then you age and you're like, oh, wait a second. Like, everything y'all told me is bullshit and you don't know what you're talking about. And I don't value that anymore. And also, like, I'm not scared anymore. And I've created this web of connections and people who really see me for who I am and value me for that. So why do I need to fit into this box that you've been trying to fit me in. And then you start to relook at the world and see people. Remember when you're like young? I don't know if you had this experience, but I remember like older women in my life, like I would be into somebody and like let's say it was a dude. I'm bisexual, but let's say it was a young man at that time. And the older women would take one look at that person and be like, that guy is, not gonna do anything good. Like they would be able to just look handsome guy, gorgeous, glorious, but they'd be able to be like, I can see what's going on the inside. And I feel like that is the gift of age, is like this kind of oracular vision to see beyond appearances into the thing that's going on inside of a person. And that becomes very beautiful and it becomes very interesting. So it's not like you're losing something in so many ways. I feel like as you get older, you gain. But I do feel like I don't want to gaslight people out there. Like I do feel like it's a struggle, you have to really wrestle with letting go of the old form, and sometimes you don't know what the new form is going to be. So you have to go through this period while you're aging of like letting go of everything that you've been told was valuable about you and everything you've been told to want, and to relinquish that. Well, you don't know yet what's going to come, but then what ends up coming is something so much more interesting than you could have imagined. I'm speaking for myself. I don't know if you've had that same experience.
Yeah. And I love this because you brought in the word oracular, which is one of our topics. So you're framing oracular vision as seeing through or beyond to the other side of something, beyond the appearances that have been shaped by our conditioning, invested in us not seeing through. So that oracular vision feels to me like truth vision and one that will empower you. Does that feel true or resonant?
Yeah, I feel like as with art, in magic, there are bottomless layers of meaning, right? So we can't just arrive at, well, Guernica means this. It's like there's always there's always more, but so I do feel like one of the themes or the truths of the oracular is that with oracular vision, you do see beyond appearances. And exactly as you said, I don't mean it as appearance, like sometimes just to be able to truly see an appearance is a real gift, right? Often we can't really see what is actually happening. Or to just like as an artist looks, a lot of people have the experience that when they start to draw or paint, that they say, oh, I've never really looked at a cup before, because when you are looking with that kind of vision, you are really noticing appearances in a way that you've never seen them before, right? You're just thinking cup and like drawing like kind of a symbol of a cup. That's a whole nother story. So then there is the oracular vision of seeing through, and that what we're seeing through is the conditioning. In other words, we're seeing beyond what we've been told to see, which makes the oracular in that sense crucial for the world that we're living in right now, where we're constantly being told, don't believe what you're seeing. You're not seeing what you think you're seeing. What you're seeing is wrong. What you're seeing should be changed or shouldn't be changed, or it's all according to the desires and will of this oligarchic class or system, this necro state, as Akil Bembe says. So this state, this system of death, basically. And I don't mean death in a good way in this context, but like a life-destroying force that I feel like the dominant culture is really possessed by. So the oracular vision is when we are able to tap into our ability to see beyond that in other people, to see beyond that in the systems that work around us, to see beyond that in ourselves, what we've been told about ourselves or what we've come to believe about ourselves. So in that sense, the oracular vision is absolutely that ability to see beyond the veil, one of the first veils, which is the veil that someone else has pulled across your eyes, or the dominant culture has pulled across your eyes. But there are also other forms of the oracular that we might get into later, such as there's a poetics of the oracular, or there is a creativity in the oracular, a generative property of the oracular. But I feel like there's so much that I've already just laid out on the table there that maybe I'll give you a shot.
I love. Yeah. So if it's cool with you, I would love to read from the email that inspired this conversation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, please. I'd love to hear that again.
And so your title had been, I'm looking at my printout and it doesn't have the title in the printout, but let's see. It was, I'm going to go. It was like early Sag. I
can't remember.
What did you call you? Follow the Torch.
Oh, yeah.
And then subtitle, wherein I condense all my work down to one sentence. Okay, bringing us in. Many of you know that I've been going through a dark night of the soul recently. Now that I see the soft light humming along the horizon, I want to share what brought the dawn for me. My dark night came because I'd felt my old ways of making work were no longer resonant for me. Between the Worlds, my podcast has been going almost 6 years now, and we're almost done with all the cards in the tarot deck. It's time for a change. Instagram, which I'd worked hard for years to build a follower base of over 50,000, had been feeling like a drag for a while. But then on October 7th and the genocide in Palestine, it just felt wrong to post this in the same way I had been. I still love to see my one-on-one clients, but even in that arena, I'd been feeling for a long while that I wanted to change the way my sessions went down. I just don't believe in the oracular as an answer anymore. The oracular is not an answer. It's not even a question. The oracular is a creative act. I needed to shift the way I talked about my work so that clients wouldn't come in expecting me to give them the answer to their problems. Instead, they needed to know that our time together was a whisper into the well of the future. Together, we would conjure the future they wanted to co-create. Anyway, for a long time, I'd been longing for change, but since I wasn't quite sure how to make that change happen in my own life, I just had to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty. Eventually, my discomfort, my itchiness propelled me into the doctoral program at UCLA you've all been hearing me talk about for the past year or so. But if you've been reading me over the past year, you'll know that my PhD program is a tremendous amount of labor, not particularly fun or comfortable. And so you've been hearing me wonder, what the fuck am I doing here? Well, witches, I figured it out. And as always, the answer is Hecate. More precisely, the answer is Hecate's torch. I may mispronounce some of these epithets. Hecate Dadukos, torchbearer. Hecate Kleidokos, she who opens the doorways. Hecate Phosphoros, she who brings the light. If you put all my work, my podcast, my book, my public rituals in a cauldron and boil it down until all that's left is the witch's stone, what you get is this. When you are lost, look for the light of inspiration.
Thank you for reading that. It's always so glorious to hear your work come through the mouth of other people, like it's really
Yeah.
very moving to hear. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for writing those words. Yeah. How does it feel? And
Well,
anything you want to let's open that door.
let's open that door. Well, gosh. I think the two things that really stood out for me in hearing that reading were the piece about the oracular not being an answer and not being a question, but being a creative act. That's really important. And then, of course, the piece of that is all my work condensed into one sentence, which is essentially to follow the light of inspiration. And the piece about inspiration is rooted in the earth of my practice and rhizomes out, the roots rhizome out into the entire witchy land that I traverse, because it really gets into the idea of what inspiration is, what the underworld is, what we're doing here. So the underworld is also the other world. They are mixed together. So the underworld is the realm of the ancestors, the realm of all that has come before us. It's the realm of the past, right? It's what we're coming out of. It's also, as with Pluto, the realm of wealth. The wealthy one is one of his epithets, that Pluto, as Hades, the lord of the underworld, that all wealth comes from the land. All wealth comes from what the earth gives us. So there are those versions of the underworld. And the realm of death is also the underworld, right? Because it's where the bones are buried and where we go when we die. So there's that. And then there's also another kind of underworld, which is a kind of hell. Maybe not the Christian version of hell, but a realm of lost souls, or a kind of labyrinth that we descend into periodically in our lives. Most of us go through some kind of underworld at some point, which I do think of as like a labyrinth, where you're lost, where you're caught, where you don't know where to turn, where you feel off track and you feel alone in that wilderness. And there are no answers, and you don't know even what questions to ask. And you are often brought to your knees by grief or any other circumstance. And there is something generative about being in that space. We do go into labyrinths, into caves, into the ground, into the earth for a reason. And the seasons of the underworld, the seasons of winter happen for a reason and are necessary. They're clearing, like in the tarot, the death card is a card of clearing, of threshing, of pulling away the forms that can't hold anymore. And they are often very uncomfortable and not necessarily something that we want to stay in. Often when we're there, we're like, I don't want to be here anymore. And yet often I've found, and I speak to this in my book, Initiated, that when we're in the underworld, often we want to find out why we're there. So we like become like little moles, and we're digging around in the dirt of like, why am I here? We're looking for something down there. Like we think it's going to give us some kind of answer down there. But what I have found is that the answer actually comes from following what I call Hecate's torch, or the light of inspiration, which is like, it's what the plants do, right? Like when we bury the seed reaches towards the heat of the sun, the light of the sun. So we don't come out of the underworld by finding out why we're in the underworld. We come out of the underworld by looking for what inspires us, by looking for beauty, by looking for what gives us life. And that could be, so if you're in a place where you're lost in your life and you're like, I just don't know what to do, look around, and you might not see anything at first. It might be like pitch black, and you're looking around and you're like, I do not know where the sun is. I don't know where, I can't see it. But you might just feel maybe like off in the distance a little heat, or you might see out of the corner of your eye, like, is that a glimmer of light? And I also want to make clear that I'm not using light and dark in the polarizing, or even worse, racialized sense. I don't believe that white people have the TM trademark on the light of the sun or the light of day. And I don't believe that like Black people are the earth and the light is the, white people. I think that's a completely ridiculous and insulting characterization. So I just want to make that clear. I'm talking about like cycles of life and seasonal cycles, cycles of death and rebirth and earthing and emergence. And so what I have found helpful is when you are in this underworld state of lostness, to start to attune to what gives you joy, what inspires you, what interests you. And you might notice like, oh, in my day yesterday, the only thing that really brought me joy was smelling this rose on my walk that was like reaching over a fence. But then you start to move towards that. And then you will see, fast forward 10 years, and you are now a landscape gardener. You are now like writing books about like the history of roses and their sacred meanings. And, you just need to take a step in that direction. And Hecate Phosphoros, like she's the torchbearer, right? Phosphoros meaning light. That torch is, she's a psychopomp. So psychopomp is someone who not just communicates with the dead, but is like a leader or a guide of souls, can guide souls through the underworld, can guide souls in the upper world. She is the one who brings souls into new life. That's why she's a midwife, right? Because at every porthole, at every threshold, she appears. So the thresholds of death, the thresholds of birth, she is this guide between worlds. And her torch is the light of inspiration and solidarity. Because what's so beautiful about it is that when you follow that torch and you find your way out of the underworld, because you followed your inspiration, you found your inspiration and you followed it, then you know the way. And then you can go back in for all the people who are still lost in there and offer your light and vision to them. like you can, and the thing is, all of us who've been in the underworld have followed the light of inspiration that someone else created. Someone planted that rose. Someone wrote that book of poetry that was like the only thing that gave you comfort in your times of sorrow. Someone wrote that song. Someone created that organization that was like helping refugees. That was the only thing that gave you hope when you felt like the world was full of malevolence. So that torch represents our solidarity for one another and our care for one another and our ability to create and inspire each other. And so for me, that idea of looking for the light of inspiration connects to all of that. And it's generative, right? Because it's not just, we're not just copying the light, but we're moving forward on our own path of emergence, right? It's something that our moving towards that, towards that torch is also a creative act. And I'll speak about that in just a moment in terms of what that means in relation to the oracular. But one last thing that I want to say is about the relationship between the torch and the Queen of Wands in the tarot. So the Queen of Wands is, we could say that she is the Queen of Torches, right? Because the wand corresponds to the suit of fire. And often you'll see the Queen of Wands appearing with a large animal, usually a cat. So sometimes she'll have like a lion by her side, or she'll have like a large panther or something. Sometimes she appears with a bear. But the animal is her fears. So the animal is all that threatens. It has fangs, it has teeth. But the Queen of Wands is not depicted running from this animal or cowering or being devoured by this animal. She's depicted often with her hand like on the brow of the large cat or the lion, or it's walking beside her, or it's like even guarding her or protecting her or empowering her. And so she is, in my view, one of the ultimate witches of the deck. There's three real, I see them as like witch figures. There may be more, but the main witch figures are the Strength card, the High Priestess, and the Queen of Wands, in my view. But so the Queen of Wands is a witch because she transforms fear into desire. That act of transmuting a fear into desire, which are really the same force, that same principle of kind of action or vibration, that heightened awareness, which comes through fear, which is useful. I mean, fear is useful. There's all sorts of reasons why fear is a good thing, right? It keeps us alive. So it's really important. And it can also often tell us what is important to us. It puts things into relief. And it also tells us when there's something meaningful to us present, right? We're not afraid of things we don't care about. There's something important for us to notice when we feel afraid. And often, at least in my work as an oracle, I see that people might find it hard. They might be in a smaller, mezzanine of the underworld, or maybe deep down in there, and they're not sure which way to go. They're lost. And fear can be a really helpful guide because it can at least be like, well, I may not know where I want to go, but I know where I don't want to go. So that would be really helpful. That's at least it's kind of like putting your mark on the tree when you're lost in the woods, right? Your fear is like a mark where it's like, okay, well, we've been here before, so keep that in mind. But then the problem with fear, or the reason why we don't just want to rest in that state of fear, is because fear takes away our agency in a lot of ways. So if you're afraid, we can imagine the Queen of Wands. The Queen of Wands is afraid of the lion. Then she might run from the lion, or she might cower and hide from the lion. But either way, the lion is kind of dictating what the Queen of Wands does. She might turn and fight the lion, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, whatever. But it's still the lion is kind of calling the shots, right? If the lion is running towards her, she's running away from the lion. She's not necessarily running towards what she wants. But what the transmutation of our fear into desire requires is that we stop in the face of that fear and then turn towards what we're longing for. And that requires a great act of courage and potentially solidarity and community, right? Like for us to find that courage is probably not something that we could just do on our own, although maybe, but mostly that often requires like encouragement from our community and our friends, or our magical practice, maybe from Hecate herself. But so our fear tells us there's something important happening here and we need to pay attention, but then we can't just stay there, or we'll just be like hiding in a closet for the rest of our life. So we have to then look for that light of inspiration, that torch. What is it that I want to move towards? What am I longing for? What is the future that I want to create here? And so, like, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're afraid of posting about your project, right? Let's say you did all this work to create this cool project, but now you're like, oh, what if nobody wants to hear about it? What if they're annoyed that I send an email about this again? What if people are sitting there judging me when I put this out into the world? What if this graphic design looks like shit? All these fears, right? So in that case, your fear is going to take away your agency because you created this thing that you want the world to see. You want to sell tickets to this thing. Like, you want to offer it to people. You want people to know about it. Of course, you just work so hard on it. But your fear's like, no, keep that in the closet. So that's not where we want to stay. But if you transform that fear of sharing your work, fear of being judged, to desire, then the desire is, well, I want to share this work with the world joyfully. Or I want to share this work and have it be received in an open-minded and curious way. And so, like, let's say that is what you want, then that gives you the steps to follow, right? Which fear doesn't do. Mm-hmm. Desire gives you steps, but fear just kind of stops the action. So, and maybe that's necessary sometimes, like you're afraid of getting more deeply involved with this person because they keep getting so drunk they pass out every time you go out with them. And it's like, well, if you're afraid of getting more deeply involved in that, there's probably a reason, and you should stop action here. But then in that case, your desire might be, I desire to be with someone who is sober, or I desire to be with someone who is aware of how I'm feeling when we go out and doesn't lose themselves in their addictions. So I desire to be with someone who's able to stay connected to me. So that shows you a course of action, which the fear doesn't, right? I'm afraid of getting involved in someone who drinks too much, doesn't really show you what to do next. But if you desire to be with someone who can stay connected to you, then you can check in with this person and be like, are they able to connect with me? Because I want that. And I see that they can't give me that. So I'm going to go somewhere else. Or like, if your desire is like, I desire to share this work with the world. And I desire to share it confidently and joyfully. Then you can work on that, and you can decide like, what are the requirements for me to feel safe in this situation? Or how will I know when I'm meeting that criteria of like joyful sharing with the world? And then it's like a path opens before you. That's what I mean. You follow the light of inspiration, of desire, of longing, and then the path opens in front of you. It's like a door will appear where there wasn't one before, when you were in fear and you were cowering in the cave and there was no opening. But if you look for that light or the heat of inspiration, that torch, then that is what creates the porthole that allows you to move forward. And to me, that is a magical act. That creation, the creation of a pathway where there wasn't one before, it's emergence, right? It's like there wasn't anything before, and now there is, because we're creating it. So it's ultimately a creative act. And that gets back to the idea of the oracular as creative, not an answer, in the sense that, you know, anybody who works for any amount of time, maybe even a night, like sometimes you hear people getting involved as tarot readers or, you know, astrologers. Maybe their first gig was like doing tarot at a party or something. And by the end of the night, they're exhausted because all these people are coming to them being like, well, you know, here's my very difficult problem and I want it to be solved. Like, what do I do? You know, what's the answer? And, you know, most people who are just starting out in this business really do try sincerely and lovingly to provide that answer, because we want to help people. That's why people get drawn into this work, you know, because we have imaginations, because most people who are in this work are really, you know, devotees of the imagination. And then also because we really want to be of service and do something good in the world. The difficulty is that it isn't as good as we think it is to just offer someone a quick and simple and easy answer. First of all, because you might have the oracular sight, but if they haven't been cultivating it, then they don't have it, which means that you could give them the answer and they'll be like, okay, but that's not what I want. So, you know, like, that's not the answer I've created for myself. Or, you know, like, people often don't understand, as far as like the, you know, divination is concerned, like, if their question is, you know, when am I going to meet the man of my dreams? And you pull the cards and you don't see that there, right? Maybe you see like, that's not going to happen until you do the specific inner work, or, you know, it looks like there's something else first. It's like, well, that's not what I want to hear. You know, like, I want to hear that I will meet him on February 2nd when I go to the coffee shop, and, you know, like, that's what people want. But I don't see the oracular as offering that, because if it does, it gets into this very specific kind of epistemology or ontology of spirit, which would be that spirit, the creative life force in the universe, is concerned with your love life, which I don't really think is the way it works. Like, I don't see the life force as having an agenda that is human. So I see the life force as wanting to express itself. It wants to emerge. It wants to come into being. It's the force of creativity. It wants to be used. It wants you to use it. It wants everything to use it. That's what I see. And I'm open to evolution of my own understanding, but over time I've seen this, that so if you've already lost if you're coming to an oracle of any kind, such as an astrologer, a tarot reader, witch, whatever, and asking, what do I do? You're already disempowered. And what you do is like invite in the energy of co-creation with the universe. And that is why I have realized over many years of doing this that the question that the person asks is key to the reading. Because so as an oracle, a big part of what I'm doing is helping people ask the right question, asking the question that will help them see the answer. And that is already creative, right? The question itself is creative. Because if you're asking, when will this thing happen? Then yeah, wrong answer, wrong question. It's like, how do I do this thing that I long for? Because if you're asking, when am I going to get the thing that I want? You're already disempowered. And nothing that an oracle says is going to change that. But we can also see through the history of the oracular, going back to, the oracle at Delphi or any other oracle, like historical oracle, it's not like they're famous for saying things in a way that's like, yeah, well, you just go to, around the street and there you have it. It's right there. Pick it up. They speak in riddles. Why do they do that? Well, they do it because they're trying to awaken your agency, awaken your wisdom. So a lot of the time, the oracles historically, like, remember the oracle says something like, I can't remember which great general, quote unquote, great, which fucking idiot general went to the oracle. But he asked her, like, should I invade Persia? And this was the oracle at Delphi. And the oracle said, if you invade Persia, you will be the destroyer of a great nation. And he was like, great, that means I'm going to go invade Persia. Of course, he, destroys his own nation in the process, right? Because it's very expensive and everything. So if he would have thought about it, he would have been like, oh, I see this is a riddle and maybe I need to think more deeply about this. Right. But why didn't you just say, no, don't invade Persia? Because if you do, you're going to destroy your own country with infighting and exhaustion of resources. She could have, but she didn't, because oracles and witches work with spirit, and their concern is not, well, is this general going to get what he wants? Like, is he going to get that promotion that he's looking for? No, it's like, they don't give a fuck. I'm not saying that that's true for me. Like, I do care about, your well-being, and I want you to get what you want, but it's more like, I want, as an oracle, I see my work as to empower you to invoke the creative forces that you need to create the life that you want to have, and to be a co-creative agent in the world, working on behalf of justice and healing and reciprocity for all beings. So yeah, so the oracular is not here just as a easy, like, follow this one weird trick to, get $1 million. It's transformative. It's alchemical. It changes your brain. It changes the way you see your life. It seeps into you and can act as like a corrosive material, can act as an acid to corrode the blocks that are keeping you from seeing your own power so that you can find your way towards that torch. Like, that's what I see it doing. And I really had to change the way that I spoke about my work because over time, because I don't want people to come sitting, like, to be in integrity. I don't want people to come and sit across from me in my Oracular studio and be like, yeah, when am I going to get this thing? Because that's not the way I work, and that's not what you're going to get from working with me. Yeah, so yeah, I think I'll stop there and check in with you. I've just been like speaking.
Yes. Yeah, I got very emotional there, which you could see, but listeners don't know. I hadn't thought about it before. This idea of being in the underworld and you don't get out because like somebody's telling you how to get out. There, you get out. Oh, I just like it hits so hard. And it's shocking, not shocking that for me, so much of what you've just shared ties back to our like opening contemplation on beauty and aging. Because, when you're younger, but you could be any age, feeling lost. Like for me, I think a lot of the underworld was like, tell me when it's not going to hurt so much to be alive, Like when will the grief go away? When will I get to a place where I don't have to feel these hard feelings? And then for me, I just feel like I eventually got old enough that there was then the sort of despair period. And then it became the inspiration period and just following that. And we shared about solidarity. Yeah, the miracle of it, I feel like, of following an inspired path is the the spirits of other people that get drawn to it. And then the light of your own torch being what draws others who are also interested in going there with you. And so the sense of belonging kind of just happens as part of the unfolding.
Yeah, because so there's so much in what you just said. When you're focused on that underworld journey, right? When you're like, why am I here? What am I doing here? How do I dig myself out of this? Like, somebody tell me the answer. You're not seeing that there's all these torches around you, right? Like, that's why somebody can't just say, well, look at the torch, because you're not going to hear it. People are telling you that all the time. There's all sorts of inspiring things around you. You can't look in any direction and not see something inspiring. But when you're lost, you don't know to do that. And that's why it's an inner transmutation. It's a shift in your ontology. It's like a big word for like your reality, your way of understanding reality. So the shift in ontology is from being like, I am at the mercy of the world, somebody give me the answer, to I am creating this together it's a co-creative act, right? Like, I am looking for the creations of other people, of other beings that have inspired me. I am moving towards them. We are co-creating this together. That's a shift, that's an awakening, and that will save us. That will save us all. Hecate also has a name, Hecate Sotira, which is Hecate's savior, and that is a part of what her saving is that torch offering, is that solidarity weaving. I also want to name that we live in an extraordinarily, unfathomably violent and horrific society that I think many of us are, awake to, and many of us are not. But there are people who have no choice but to be awake to that because of the, violence of white supremacy, or, trans people, or, people struggling with homelessness, or, queer people being exiled from their families. There's all sorts of people whose ability to see the light of inspiration is made much more difficult by the circumstances that they're in, right? It's much easier of a task, I would say, to look around and see inspiration when you're like on the beach of Malibu than if you're, on the beaches of Gaza right now. And I do still hold true that like your survival, to the degree that you are in control of it, which we're not always, there's outside forces that are beyond our control, will be enhanced and aided by looking for the light of solidarity and connection, and looking for the light of inspiration, even when you are in the worst of circumstances. I'm not saying that that's going to be easy, but I am saying that's where life is. That's where the possibility of continuing life is, in looking for the what inspires you, which might be like healers, which might be people who show up when there's times of crisis, and which might even be just someone else in your circumstance who says like, yeah, I see it too. I see this violence too. And that might be that feeling of like connection and community might be then the torch that you move closer to. And of course, there's a real trick. There's some discernment that's involved. There's one of the oldest stories is the story of the Sophia, which is, the goddess of wisdom. And she's also thought of kind of as like the Holy Spirit. And the way that the story goes, briefly, is that she's like on this level of heaven that's very close to God, right? She's like an angel. Let's imagine her as like one of the angels closest to God in this like very ancient, Judeo-Christian mythology, so ancient that it's really more pagan than it is Christian. Like what we understand of as Christianity, or potentially even Judaism, hadn't really emerged or hadn't really solidified yet when this story came about. So she's looking into the abyss, into the darkness of the abyss, and she sees this glimmer of light, and she moves towards it, and she falls from this like light of heaven where everything's good into the darkness of the abyss. In fact, she falls into material reality. She falls into our incarnation. And there are all these, what that little glimmer was, it was like a mirror, like that the demonic beings had like created this mirror that reflected the light of God, or the totality of being, or the goodness, or whatever, and was like shining it back at her. So she fell into incarnation by following that light. It was she mistook this other light that was actually something else for the light of God, and she fell. And then she was tormented, right? She became incarnated, and there's all this, story about her being assaulted, and she becomes a sex worker, and she's like treated horribly, and she like wanders the world, and eventually, she becomes the Sophia, which is like the goddess of wisdom. She becomes the world soul, the anima mundi, who is also Hecate, interestingly enough. But so this discernment it comes through having made this mistake of thinking like, oh, I thought that was the light that was going to call me out, or, that fascinated me. And then it turned out to be something that was harmful. And so the question is like, oh my God, how do I know? How do I distinguish? And that's another thing that I'm not sure that someone else can tell you for you, but I think that they can say, well, this is what works for me. For me, what works is going slowly and listening to my body, like listening to what I feel like I have the capacity for through showing up for my body and the signals that it gives me with like compassion and care and love instead of harassment and punishment. So if the voices that you're hearing when you follow that light, even within yourself, are harassing, punishing, critical, shaming voices, then that's your signal to slow down and to find that light also within yourself, which is, the light of compassion and care and personal solidarity. Which then brings us to, the hermit year is like next year is the hermit year. And that's about that cultivation of that inner light or that inner wisdom.
Yeah. Do you differentiate between this torch and the lantern of the hermit? Or I'm just curious if you feel that they're of the same thing or...
Well, what's really interesting is the lantern of the hermit, it carries the star within it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the star also appears in the tarot. And so does the sun, because it's a star. And the wand of the, Queen of Wands is a torch. And all fire is the same. It's the same element. So, all fire connects to all fires throughout the universe.
Oh God, that makes me weepy. Oh, that's so true.
So when you speak into the fire, when you speak into your candle, you speak your spells into the fire, that connects not only to all fire throughout the universe, but all fire throughout time, throughout history and time, right? Like you're speaking into the realm of spirit.
Thank you so much. You are sensational.
You're
my
sensational.
Goodness.
Thank you for creating this cauldron.
You're welcome. Thanks for inspiring it. You did the very thing you were calling in as inspiration. You passed the torch over and immediately I DM'd you.
we were waving our torches at each other from across the mountaintops.
I see you. What a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and your inspiration and your words and all of the just contemplation that you put into your creativity to ground it into your integrity. It's just breathtaking. And
thank you so much. Thank you.
I feel such depths from your creativity.
Thank you. Well, the witch in me sees and honors the witch in you. I feel like, I see the same depth and honor and care put into your own work, and the compassion and joy that you hold the world with, and the questioning and the curiosity in particular, I just think is the thing that really makes your work sing. That curiosity and love, fascination with the poetry and beauty of what you're doing. It really is an inspiration, and I feel honored to have been a part of it today.
Thank you. Do you want to share any ways listeners can connect to you? Anything you're doing in 2025?
Yeah, so I have a online group called Mystery Cult on Substack. Amanda Yates Garcia at no, sorry, that's a different thing. AmandaYatesGarcia.substack.com. And the first level is free if you just want to subscribe to the newsletter, or I'm also having this workshop series for the Hermit year. And we're doing Book of Shadows workshop, and we're doing a Hermit year preparation workshop, and we're doing a Calling in Your Guides workshop. And then I also lead moon rituals once a month through that. And and then if anybody is listening, if you have any listeners over in the UK and Scotland, Ireland, or England, this summer I'm going to be holding a one-day workshop with my friend and poet Rebecca Sharp, and we're going to be doing a one-day workshop in Edinburgh. So if you are interested in cultivating your witchly and poetic skills, then I hope you join up for that, or keep abreast of the situation there. I also have a podcast, Between the Worlds. We're wrapping that up now, but there's like hundreds of episodes for you to go and listen to. If you're interested in the tarot, you'll get a big, you'll have more than enough to keep you busy for a while. And you can also find me on Instagram at Oracleville.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Oh, thank you so much, Britton. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Listeners, if you are inspired and called to be connected to Amanda Yates Garcia, inviting you to join her Substack, to join her mystery cult, which you can do for free, or you can become a member. I'm a member because her newsletter, her writing is one of the few that I just really don't like to miss. Like, I just really, really, really receive so much that it felt an integrity to join, because I feel that inspired by her writing. So there's a whole lot more of Amanda's voice if you are feeling it. For those of you who are Moon to Moon regulars, I'll be back soon with a new message. I'm very, very, very excited to be announcing the new Magician's Table for 2025. The course page is ready to go. You can already begin to learn all about it and get a sneak peek at this year's 13th readers. You'll be hearing a whole lot more about this year's Magician's Table, the 5th iteration. It's our Hierophant year. The 5th iteration of the Magician's Table is this spring, 2025, and there will be more on that soon. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. If you love Moon to Moon, I hope you will leave a rating or review if you never have before. Thank you. It is so fun to see new reviews. It's just the most exciting thing. And if you love this podcast, inviting you to check out my new one, Crystal Ballers with Natasha Levenger. We just started. We have 3 episodes out. This is a Pluto and Aquarius project. Feels so expanded already by what's happening over there in Crystal Ballers. So please check that out. Thank you so much. And until next time, take care.